Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Well, I'm Ernie Chambers still, and I'm back to do a little bit of conversating. There is something that happened not long ago, and this article is from September 21st, not too many days ago. Sometimes we look at a person's badge or his or her title and assume that that person is going to live up to what that title represents. And one of the most hypocritical operations happens to be the church. There are a lot of hustlers who get involved because they know that people who come to church, especially elderly people and poor people, are looking for something to help relieve the tensions, the pressures, just the grinding poverty that a lot of them face. They wind up giving their last nickel to the church, and these preachers who are eating enough to get large, who are driving fancy cars, and if it was a rainy day, would drive right past one of the parishioners who's struggling through the rain or even the snow and not care a hoot. Recently, in the church that has the largest single membership in America, it's not the largest church in the world, but it's larger than any other denomination, which is Catholicism. Catholics like to put up a pitiful mouth and act like they are the ones being discriminated against, but there is no other religion in America as large as that of the Catholics, and in the world they might have the largest membership overall. But at any rate, they have some scoundrels in their midst, not just when it comes to sexually abusing little boys, some cases girls, and in other cases, even adults. They also have thieves among them. But why should that surprise anybody when, according to the legend, Jesus had 12 disciples and one of them was a snitch, namely Judas. He carried the bag. That's what it said. Now, I don't know that there's anything that indicates he was a thief, but he certainly was a betrayer, and all the rest of them were deserters. When time came and Jesus needed somebody, all of those so-called disciples fled. They ran, and yet they had walked supposedly with the Son of God. They had seen him heal the sick, raise the dead, feed thousands, and could call down angels or fire on enemies. Yet when he was in trouble, maybe that caused them to lose faith and say, if he were all that he says, this that's happening to him now would not happen. But in any case, they ran. Well, in this article dated September 21st of this year, it's in the World Herald. I'm going to read it. The former chancellor of Omaha's archdiocese is suspected of stealing almost $180,000 from a former priest who himself had been accused of sexual misconduct and stole almost $100,000 from a church in Springfield. And you know what this guy's theme song could be? Round, round, get around, I get around, oh, get around, round, round, I get around, I get around. And everywhere he went, he left a trail of wrongdoing. The Archdiocese of Omaha announced last month that the Reverend Michael F. Gutschel, and I'm going to spell his name because it might sound like the name of somebody whose name also sounds the same. Gutgessell, Gutschel, 72, had resigned after a routine audit uncovered theft. The Archdiocese did not detail the alleged theft other than to say it had turned the matter over to the police. The World Herald has since learned through court documents and a law enforcement official that Gutschel is accused of stealing $170,000 from the savings account of the Reverend Theodore Richling Jr. Now, I don't know if this is the Richling who was once a U.S. attorney, Ted Richling, but if he did turn from being a U.S. attorney into a priest, he was a rat in the U.S. attorney's office, and he carried those traits with him. Anyway, he's alleged to have stolen $170,000 from the savings account of Reverend Theodore Richling Jr. and $96,000 from the last parish that Gutschel served, which was St. Joseph in Springfield. Deacon Tim McNeil, the current chancellor of the archdiocese, said Gutschel, quote, wrote loans to himself, which were not authorized during his time at St. Joseph. McNeil said the archdiocese recently completed its investigation into the financial records of both St. Joseph in Springfield and St. Cecilia in Omaha, two of the parishes Gutschel served after serving as chancellor. Maybe when he was chancellor, it gave him a chance to see how much was available in other areas to steal. At any rate, to continue. Officials found no evidence of financial wrongdoing at St. Cecilia, according to Mr. McNeil. At St. Joseph, McNeil said he did not know how many checks Gutschel was able to write to himself or how he was able to bypass typical safeguards requiring a second set of eyes on church transactions. The archdiocese is continuing to investigate these matters, McNeil said. Authorities have not said where the missing funds went. Gutschel's phone had been disconnected, probably didn't pay his phone bill, stiffened the phone company even. Anyway, his phone has been disconnected. Attempts to reach him through a relative went unreturned. Relatives probably disowned him, unless they're all locked up in jail themselves. His attorney could not be reached Monday, hiding under the desk, telling the secretary, if it's from the World Herald, don't answer, or tell him I'm not here. In an application to search the accounts of Richling, who died in December 2019, Omaha police wrote that Gutschel, acting as power of attorney, had stolen $170,042 for his own personal use. Richling himself had his own share of allegations leveled against him from his time at Christ the King Catholic Church in Omaha and at a church in Genoa, Nebraska. In 2020, the archdiocese said an investigation of Richling, quote, led to the substantiation of multiple instances of sexual misconduct with minors, unquote. People sending their children to the Catholic Church. People look at the priest and apply the term father to all of them. I guess to suggest that this is like the head of the family and he's going to take care of them. Jesus said, the good shepherd gives his life to save the sheep. But he also mentioned there are those who come in sheep's clothing, but inside they are ravening wolves. Richling was one of the wolves. Continuing, Gutschel had been assigned power of attorney to take care of Richling in his ailing latter years, including at a nursing home, and was later assigned to oversee the administration of his estate. Douglas County Attorney Don Klein said his office is working with Omaha Police and Sarpy County authorities to finalize the investigation before charges are filed. Gutschel has been seen around Omaha in his priest garb since his resignation. His resignation means that he is not assigned to a parish. Now here he is facing charges. He's a thief, but he's still walking around with a backward collar, black coat and breeches. So it shows you can't always tell a book by its cover. Now, I wear, well, I have a black sweatshirt on today, jeans and boots. If you judge by attire, he should have far more credibility than I. No scandal has ever been connected to or associated with my name. No drinking, no smoking, no cursing, no drugs, no carousing, no chasing women or men, little boys or little girls, none of it. But if they stood him in his priestly garb next to me in my what you might call common man outfits, guess which one they would point to if they were asked to point to the one with the highest moral standing, the highest set of values, and the one most likely to go to heaven. He would win hands down. People are impressed by badges and titles, and that's why some of them get snookered. Continuing the article. Court documents indicate that Gutschel served as either power of attorney or an estate conservator for Richling and 4 other priests over the last 20 years. As part of the investigation, Klein said detectives and his office's investigators may look into the accounts of the other priests Gutschel oversaw. It shouldn't be they may do it. They have an obligation to do it. If Klein is going to uphold his oath as a lawyer, and I think he's violated it before, that's another matter though, he is to follow wherever a trail of wrongdoing may lead when he assumes the role of county attorney. If this man has stolen before, and he has been in a position to steal again, every place where his dirty hands had touched should be investigated. Continuing. The investigation is a turnabout for a priest to achieve prominence in Omaha. Assigned by then Bishop Eldon Curtis, Gutschel was chancellor of the archdiocese from 1994 to 2003. One of his duties over that decade to handle personnel issues, including investigations into crimes allegedly committed by priests. They who walk with the lame themselves will learn to limp. He was investigating crimes, he became a criminal. Lie down with dogs, get up with fleas. After his chancellorship, Gutschel was a pastor in Fort Calhoun, Nebraska for a couple of years. From 2005 to 2017, he served as pastor of St. Cecilia Cathedral in Omaha. At St. Cecilia, he was known for being controlling and guarded with information about parish finances, rarely revealing much even to church lay leaders. He took over at St. Joseph on July 1st, 2017. Excuse me. Sometimes criminality runs in a family. What about Jesse James and Frank James? What about those 4 Dalton brothers? It runs in the family. Somebody asked Jesse James, though, why he never robbed poor people and robbed only the rich. They thought they were going to hear a story of a noble thief like Robin Hood supposedly was. Jesse just looked at him and laughed. He said, poor folks ain't got no money. Gutschel's brother, Stephen, pleaded guilty in 2007 to felony theft by deception for embezzling $127,000 from St. Patrick Catholic Church in South Omaha. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation. You think anybody else who did that would get probation? But these prosecutors and judges, a lot of them are Catholics, and one hand washes the other. They scratch these guys back, they scratch the back scratchers back. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation and ordered to pay $40,000 in restitution, roughly a third of the amount stolen. Where would he get the $40,000? Where'd he get it in the first place? You do what you know how to do. He stole, probably. Stephen Gutschall, now 63, paid a little more than $27,000 in restitution by the time his 5 years were up. A judge released him from probation after Archbishop George Lucas said the archdiocese had made arrangements for him to pay the $13,000 he still owed. A law enforcement source said the brothers are now living together. They ought to be cellmates, huh? He's sitting up in his little box with a latticed window so he can see who's coming. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. How's he going to forgive somebody? Jesus is the one who forgives, not a human being, but that's the Catholic Church. It's a church of, by, and for men. They do what they please, and they get away with it. Former popes have been implicated in some of the worst child sexual abuse that occurred in the Catholic Church. I won't go into what the last pope had done, but anyway, so much for the Catholics. Now let's get down to you all's American government. The land of the free, the home of the brave. God bless America. And you pledge allegiance to a flag. And that flag salute has lies. You pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. First of all, they're not united. Pick up the paper, you read, and you hear on the news, people say that the country is more divided than ever. So that's the first lie, the United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, that's false, indivisible, it's divided, that's 3. With liberty, that's 4. Justice, that's 5. For all, 6 lies. Talk to the people who are designated by the letters LGBTQ. Talk to those people. Talk to Latinos, Latinx. And you know, those of my complexion, your and my complexion, have caught hell ever since we've been in this country. And pardon the use of that word, which is used in the Bible more times than I've used it in my life. That's the kind of hypocrisy in this country. And now these racists are against what is called critical race theory, which points out that there has always been racism in this country, segregation and discrimination. Look what happened during the so-called civil rights struggle. Martin Luther King and other ministers getting hit upside the head and put in jail. Little children had fire hoses turned on them. One of the most iconic photographs shows a young Black kid in the clutches of one cop and another one is sicking a police dog on him. Other pictures of elderly women on the ground with a cop having his knee against her chest in America during your and my lifetime. And these racists want to say that you can't teach that because little white kids are made to feel guilty. These kids didn't do anything. They don't feel guilty. The white adults are the ones who feel guilty, but they are always trying to hide behind somebody and blame somebody else and not suffer the consequences of their own wrongdoing. When I was in the legislature, they had never seen a Black man like me. And I turned them every which way but loose. And I challenged them all the time. Do your worst. I would tell them things like, I'm unfair and I'm unreasonable because I'm dealing with people who come down here with a thimble full of brains, and I expect them to produce a bushel basket full of sense. That's not going to happen. They couldn't match me in anything. They couldn't even speak the language of this country as well as I speak it. They didn't know the difference between grammar and syntax, not SINTAX, where you tax wickedness like alcohol and things like that. SYNTAX, the use of words, the arrangement of words. Americans know how racist this country is because they practice it. They know what they teach their children at home, at school, at play. They know of the discrimination in employment because they practice it. And some have seen themselves get jobs that they knew the Black applicant was more qualified for. They know it. But let me read from a white man's newspaper, once again, the Omaha World Herald. And that about the priest was this year. This is from 2006. Notes illuminate Churchill debates. This is from the Washington Post. The British leader disliked America's segregation of Black troops, is a sidebar to the article in heavy print and larger letters. London. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill favored summarily executing German leader Adolf Hitler in an electric chair if captured, rather than holding, quote, farce trials for Hitler and other top Nazis, unquote, according to British news media reports describing recently declassified World War II era documents. Declassified, and that's when the truth comes out. Like this woman wrote a book about Trump and what happened in the White House and Trump's wife. She worked for Trump longer than anybody else in his administration. But when she told the truth in her book, his wife said, well, she is not good at her job, and she did not do a good job, and she is trying to make up for her shortcomings. But she continued to work in the Trump administration until January 5th, the day before that attack on the Capitol building that had all those Republicans running like scared rabbits by Trump's people. And when this woman told the first lady, as she was called, to talk to her husband about saying something, and they refused, she resigned on the spot. They didn't fire her. That was the last straw for her. And now she has written this book. And one thing that is very telling, and while they were describing this scene as she laid it out in the book, they showed Trump and Putin, his master's voice, together. And Trump had said just before the media came in, now this woman heard it because she's there, she's Trump's right hand. Trump said, now I'm going to have to be a little rough on you in a few minutes, but that's just for the cameras and the public. And when they're gone, then we'll get together and talk like we always do, or words to that effect. Running a scam on all those idiotic white people who still worship him. He was a liar, a trickster. As the Bible says, the devil was from the beginning, and they worship him. I guess there is an answering echo in their genes and chromosomes to the wickedness of Trump. And you know what Putin said? He said that when he and Trump were talking, he made sure that he had an attractive young interpreter translator to distract Trump. And then because he knew that Trump was a germaphobe, he would clear his throat and cough to unstabilize this madman in the White House. When he spoke before the United Nations, the people actually were laughing at him, laughing at him. He was a joke to everybody in the world. That's why that general did this country a service when he called the Chinese general and told him that America is not going to launch an attack against China. No unlawful order will be obeyed. Launching nuclear weapons, if ordered to do so, would constitute an illegal, unlawful order, and if it was given, it would not be obeyed. Now, that was his duty. The general took an oath that he took more seriously than Trump. The general, in his military oath, swore to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, all enemies. He took it seriously enough to do what he felt was necessary to perhaps prevent something very, very dangerous and destructive from taking place. He behaved like a general. Trump was a madman. Pelosi used the word crazy, and others in the military did also. Now, these racists like to talk about how we as Black people don't assume our responsibilities. But Black people wearing the uniform of this country that had enslaved their ancestors, raped our women. And as for these white racists who were slaveholders, you think they did not rape these Black women? And they all claim to be Christians. So they committed adultery too. They were adulterers, they were rapists, they were pedophiles, they raped little Black girls. Thomas Jefferson bred slaves and sold them for revenue, like you do livestock. And you know what these slave purchasers could do? They stripped the women naked, and the slave buyers could examine them, their teeth, their breasts, spread their legs, make them bend over, spread their cheeks, spread the lips of their vagina. Oh, they did these things. And you think they didn't? These rats. And Black men put on the uniform of this country and went overseas. And they fought the Germans. They helped defeat Hitler. There was one of the death camps that the Black soldiers liberated, and the Jews had never seen Black men before, and they referred to them as Black angels, not subhumans. They rescued these Jews from Christian white Germans who were gassing them, burning their bodies, and burning some people before they died, lining them up along the edge of a trench, down on their knees with their hands behind their back, and would walk up behind each one and discharge a bullet in the base of the skull. And they'd fall into this mass grave. Again, not all of them were dead at the time the dirt was pushed in on them. And Black men fought for other people. who would not give them the time of day. And some military people after the war talked about having thought this over as they watched the heroism of the Black men who thought if they conducted themselves in a meritorious manner, there might be some freedom for them and the people back home. But Black people were still being lynched by white Americans, while these Black men were risking their lives wearing the American uniform on foreign soil to rescue other white people who were being killed by savage white people. Savagery accompanied white people, especially Europeans, wherever they went. Read history. And some of these ignoramus white people just got a sampling of it recently, and they said, good God, this is what our ancestors did. We can't have the white kids learning this. And that's why they don't want the history of America taught the way it really occurred. When the French were impressed by the Black soldiers, wanted to give them the highest award they had, the Croix de Guerre, the military cross, the American High Command put the kibosh on it and said, don't give them those medals. Don't award them that. We don't treat them that way in our country, and we don't want them to get the wrong idea. And the Frenchmen were shocked. Lafayette, who fought on the side of this country during the American Revolution, and he was a whale of a military man. He said when he discovered the slavery in this country, and that after he fought to help free America, and the ones he helped free were holding slaves in the most brutal, corrupt, sex-drenched human trafficking that had not been known in the history of the world before. Had he known that's what was going on, he would never have drawn his sword in the cause of the Americans. Americans don't want that taught either. But it's in the books. They can't burn all of the books. And there are some young white people who are opposed to what these old white men primarily are trying to do to scrub away history, because some of these young white people have been abused by these old white men themselves. But let me read. The declassified notes taken by Deputy Cabinet Secretary Norman Brooke provide the first unfiltered look at debates among Churchill and his cabinet members on key issues at the height of World War II. Where are you going to get information like this from anybody other than me or somebody like me? We need to read, not just what's in the newspaper. We need to read history. Malcolm X said, of all areas of study, history is most suited to reward our search. Words to that effect. I'm going to read this, start this sentence and just read it through. The declassified notes taken by Deputy Cabinet Secretary Norman Brooke provide the first unfiltered look at debates among Churchill and his cabinet members on key issues at the height of World War II. Previously released minutes of cabinet meetings have described discussions in general terms without providing details of debates on matters such as how Britain would deal with any captured members of the senior Nazi leadership. The documents made public at the National Archives also show that Churchill decreed that Britain, quote, mustn't interfere, unquote, with racial discrimination practices in the World War II era US military. Churchill said, do not interfere with what these racist devils are doing to Black people, because we need them over here, including these Black men they are discriminating against. Going back to the reading, At the time, Black soldiers in the British Army, they had Black men in their army. They had a lot of islands and other places where Black people are. They had an empire. At the time, Black soldiers in the British Army were treated equally, while Black and white US soldiers ate and slept in separate areas. The documents show that Churchill and other ministers took a dim view of, quote, US prejudices, unquote, but did not want the issue to cause friction between the Allies. Isn't that the way it is always with us? Black men over there risking their life to save Britain, being discriminated against, but the Brits were so concerned about not offending these racist white people and stopping or attacking their prejudicial actions towards soldiers. Showed that Churchill told his people, although we take a dim view of their prejudice, they don't want that to cause friction between the Allies. Continuing, in October 1942, Churchill told the cabinet that US views, quote, must be considered, unquote. The cabinet agreed to instruct military leaders to respect US policies, not US soldiers who are Black, to respect US policies without allowing them to influence British practices. In other words, respect what the Americans are doing to their Black soldiers, but don't you let that infiltrate our ranks and you start doing what these savage Americans are doing. The racists who say they don't want critical race theory taught in the schools. What they mean is they want to clean up the rottenness in American history. But the Churchill officials did advise that British troops should show, quote, a great deal of reserve, unquote, when dealing with Black US troops. You cannot treat them like comrades in arms. You have to treat them, rather mistreat them in the way that white Americans are mistreating their own so-called citizens. But see, the British understand English. They had read the US Constitution. They found, now I'm saying this, it's my words that I'm putting in their mouth. They found no definition of second-class citizenship and third-class citizenship. Either you were a full-fledged first-class citizen or you were not a citizen at all. Since Black people were not first-class citizens, they were not even citizens of America. They were still semi-slaves. What I'm going to do next time is read an item of mine that the World Herald printed, where I talked about some of these sex traffickers, known otherwise as the founding fathers of this country. They might have founded a country, but they didn't find religion. They didn't find ordinary, common human decency when it came to dealing with us. And Black people have shown more loyalty to this country than any other group. No Black person was ever charged with treason. Benedict Arnold was a white guy. His name stands for being treasonous. The white people who've revealed military secrets are not Black. It is difficult to live in this country as a Black person and not go off the deep end and decide to take as many of them with us as we could. But we, in general, have never felt that is the way. I have behaved as a fool. I was in the game by being in the legislature, but I was not playing the game the way they played it. The favoritism, stepping on people who were weak. I played the game the way I thought it should have been played, because in reality, it was not a game to me. Having experienced so much mistreatment, even when I was young and in school, their adults would mess over our Black children. It didn't put me in the frame of mind as a man to do to any child what white adults had done to us. These children are not responsible for what their parents did. How could I get satisfaction mistreating a child because some adult did something wrong? I was the most popular senator among all children, regardless of race, in that legislature. Somehow, a picture and an article about what I did on the issue of South Africa got into the fourth grade textbook that children in classes all over the state had. And one reporter wrote about this group of school kids who had come and they were in the balcony. And when I was talking and my voice was heard, they stood up and some leaned over the balcony and they were saying, "There's that man, there he is." One of these days, I will talk about the invitations I had to come speak to white children in school and the difference between the way they reacted to me and the way they reacted to their teachers and the counselors and others who are the same complexion as they, who should have treated them just because they're innocent children with some consideration, knowing that these people who were their parents had entrusted these precious little ones to these teachers and counselors whom they mistakenly thought had in mind to do what was best for these little children. But more and more articles are coming out now and stories about the way these adults are getting into sexual tie-ins to young students. I don't even see how somebody could think of doing something like that. But we have always had to be better than they. And one of the reasons they hate us so much is because we haven't resorted to doing toward them what they've done toward us. And there's a fear also because they think someday our minds might click and we'll realize what they've really done to us and we will do to them what they've done to us. Anticipating how they would behave were they mistreated by somebody in the way they're mistreating us, they take measures against us as though we're actually doing it. As though we're actually doing it. And we have to maintain more than sanity. We have to be virtual saints. And although I will ridicule Toms and the rest of them, how can I really be too hard on a person whose life could be taken if he dared look a white man in the eye? But there are bitternesses that all of us would have when we think rationally about what has been done and what is being done now, and the boldness with which so-called white educators and their leading politicians are saying, don't teach the truth of American history because we need these little white children to feel patriotic. And what they're leaving unsaid is the only way they can be made to feel patriotic is if lies are told, if we keep from them what this country has been built on, which was the backs of Black men and women. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Frederick Douglass said, physical beauty was the greatest curse for any Black woman. He had seen the cruelty inflicted on these women. So how, if you're rational, are you to react to things like that? When America has gone to war against people thousands of miles away who had not done anything at all directly to America. They went to war. Bombs, napalm, machine gun fire, torture, molestation of women, brutalization of little children against people who had done nothing to them. They know what ought to be done to them by us, but we haven't resorted to it. But that encourages them to do even more and to make Black people understand what my thinking was during the 60s and early 70s. This nonviolence is not going to work. Now, I never initiated any violence against anybody, but I wasn't going to let anybody put their hands on me and get away with it. And if I could stop them before they put their hands on me when I knew that was what they were going to do, but I won't go into all of that. But see, I don't have a lot of knots and bumps on my face. I don't have a lot of scars on my face. But at any rate, we are not doing as we have been done by. And white people hate us for that. We, as yet, have not given them an excuse or justification for the cruel things they continue to do. They boast about this being a democracy. The word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. That word does not appear at all. These so-called founding fathers were not establishing a democracy. They were establishing what they called a republic, representative government. That's why the Constitution says the federal government will guarantee to every state a Republican form of government, Republican with a small r, Republican meaning representative government. You send representatives that you vote for to form a government and represent you. There is no democracy. There is no direct governing by the people. And that's what demos, the people. This is a hard place to live if you're conscious, if you think, if you are informed. But knowledge is power. And I want the day to come when it can no longer be said by us as Black people, my people, I say perish, but the Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And the crybaby prophet said, oh, that my head were waters, plural, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for my people. And that's when I jump to that other book in the Bible and say, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Knowledge is power. And something that we all can do, whether we get into office or not, is register and vote. All of this yow-yow going on in the legislature about redistricting to elect Congress people and senators is based on the fact that in the political system is where the true power rests in this country. Billions of dollars are spent. These white people don't want us to vote, don't want us to register, will get us to say stupidly because we don't understand that politics is something we don't need to be in. And I believe that my time is up. And even if it's not, I'm going to say, as the canary says, or would do, if he found out the cage door was open, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.